Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shaman's Way podcast. This is actually our 10th episode, which is pretty exciting for us. It's a bit of a mini milestone, eh, Kriket?
Well, I think it's an awesome milestone.
And today, if I understand correctly, you've got another story for us.
I do have another story, and it is different from sealskin, because sealskin we talked about the lessons of water, and in this we're talking about the lessons in our wounds and how can our wounds enable us, or how can our wounds help us. This story is taken from a book called Tales from the Bush, and it was written by or compiled by a gentleman named Lawrence Vanderpost. It is called The Necklace. It is also referred to as the Nubian Woman. A long time ago, but really maybe not that long ago, but time never really kind of travels in any straight line. It's a circular thing. So it could have been yesterday, but it could have been like a long time ago. But anyway, it wasn't in this world. It was in a place that is east of the sun and west of the moon, in a land far, far away. In this village that was in a faraway land, there lived a most beautiful Nubian woman. And she knew that the women of her village talked about her, and she never really could understand why. And it was a tradition in her tribe that the women would weave their own necklaces out of juju beads. And this beautiful Nubian woman had such craft and beauty within her own hands that she had made a necklace that was envied by the other women in the village. And when she would walk by in her beautiful red toga with her basket upon her head, she would hear the whispers of the other women as she walked by, and she never knew what they said, but her heart broke, and she knew whatever they said, it could not have been good. And one Friday, because every Friday all the women would go down to the river and they would wash their clothes and they would let them dry on the rocks at the side, and it was a great social event this Friday. This particular Friday, the women had all gone down ahead of the beautiful Nubian woman and had started washing their clothes. And when she came up, the women said, "Oh, come, join us. Come have fun with us." Wow. The beautiful woman was very taken aback. She was overjoyed to be included in with the women of her village. And she walked forward and she said, "Yes, I will. Oh, good. And they splashed her and had fun. And then the woman realized that none of her village mates were wearing their necklaces. And she said to them, "Where are your necklaces?" And the women said, well, we came down earlier today and we did a special ceremony to the gods and the goddesses of the river, and we threw our necklaces into the river." Oh, this struck the woman's soul with a chord of deep reverence, and she said, I too would love to do this. And with great solemnity, she took the Nubian necklace off her neck, and she looked at the juju beads, and she held it to her forehead, and she said very special prayers, and she threw it with all her soul's might into the river. And all of a sudden there's laughter erupted. "You stupid woman, why would you throw that beautiful necklace in the river? You don't honestly think we all threw our necklaces in the river? How stupid are you?" And they splashed her with water and they made fun of her. And then they went to the place that was on the side of the water in the bank, and they dug out their necklaces. They washed their juju bead necklaces and they put them around their necks, and they laughed at her. Very slowly and very dejectedly, the Nubian woman put upon her red toga, and she said fervent prayers to the gods and the goddesses of the river. "Please give me back my necklace. Will you please give me back my necklace?" And dejected as she was, she placed her clothes in the basket and placed the basket upon her head and slowly walked along the river banks. And she stopped. She thought she heard something. No, she couldn't have heard anything. It must have just been the gurgle of the river. And she walked a little further. And she heard it again. What was that? She thought she heard words. Plunging. She walked a little further, and it became even stronger. Plunging. And she didn't wait to ask to be a third time. And she plunged into the water, and she fell down further and further and further and further and landed at the bottom of the river on the riverbed. And slowly the sediment began to settle. And she saw exactly 12 feet in front of her the most hideous river hag you could ever see. Her face was gaunt, it was skeletal. Her eyes were bugging out of her head. Her wild hair, feet long, strewn behind her in the movement of the river. And she said, with her skin oozing with sores and her long fingers with long fingernails, and she looked with her hard eyes across the bottom of the river, and she said to the young woman, "Lick my sores. Lick my sores." And the Nubian woman, being the woman that she was, on her hands and her knees, she crawled to the old woman. And she gently raised her hand to her mouth. She swallowed that last swallow. And she took her tongue and slowly licked the wound of the sea hag. And she licked the wound of the sea hag. And right before her very eyes, the most amazing miracle occurred. All of the wounds on the skin of the sea hag closed, and her clothes, which had been shreds, turned into this most beautiful toga, and she became luminescent and radiant. And she looked at the Nubian woman and she said, "Thank you. Thank you for showing me love and compassion." And all of a sudden, and the old woman said, "Quick, quick, get under my riverbed sheets. Quick, quick, get under my riverbed sheets." And she took the Nubian woman, she shoved her down deep, deep underneath her riverbed. Runs the old demon of the river. "Where is she? I can smell the blood of a young woman." "You'll never catch her," said the old hag. "You'll never catch her. She went that away. She left about an hour and a half ago. You'll never catch her, you ugly old demon of the river." "Fine." And she waited a good long while it was silent. And she lifted up her riverbed coat, and she pulled, and she pulled, and she pulled until the Nubian woman was in front of her. And she said, "Now I have a gift for you." And deep underneath her riverbed coats, she pulled out the most beautiful necklace you could ever imagine, made of silver and gold and all the beautiful stones of reds and purples and greens. And maybe, if you like that sort of thing, maybe there was even diamonds. But you wouldn't get this storyteller with diamonds. No, not at all. It was green and red and citrine of yellow, the most beautiful necklace she had ever seen. And the old woman, her hands, and out of the water she went. And the old woman, her hands, and the most beautiful white toga was there before her feet, and she dressed herself. And the white hag her hands again, and in front of her came the most beautiful white basket. And when she looked back over the river had moved and twirled and spoke so loud that there was foam and white upon the river. And as she dressed herself, put on the necklace, and adorned her head with the beautiful white basket, the river slowly returned to its very gentle gurgle. She looked into the river and she saw a reflection, and she saw the soul of who she was, and she saw the soul of who she was, how changed she was, how luminescent she was. Her reflection shone back the woman that she was. And it was Friday again, don't you know, same as it ever was. It was Friday again, and the women were coming down from the village to do their laundry. And they saw her, and they saw something was completely different about her. And they ran up to her and said, "Oh, what a beautiful necklace! Where did you get that necklace?" And being the woman that she was, she pointed towards the river. But before she could say, "Stop!" the women were all running into the water, and they dove down deep and deep and deep into the water. And they landed, and when the sediment had settled, they saw the ugliest old river hag you have already been introduced to. And they heard her words when she said, "Lick my sores. Lick my sores." And the women huddled together when they saw her, and they huddled together even tighter when she said that. And they're like, "Ew, are you kidding? That is so disgusting. I'm not licking those sores for anything." And all of a sudden, the demon of the river came along, because he had smelt the blood of all these young women, and he gobbled them up, and their bones went to the top of the river, and he gobbled them up, and their bones went to the top of the river, and he gobbled them up, and their bones went to the top of the river. And they floated as the white objects that they were in that threshold place of water and air and mystery and death. And that is the story of the Nubian woman. So I would really like to delve into what this story meant. How does it apply to the lessons of our wounds? I love this story for the very fact that it is a different vision. It is a beautiful black Nubian woman, and sometimes living in central Alberta, I am inundated with stories of beautiful Caucasians, so it is always lovely to have the ancestors speak to us from another time and another place. I think it is an indication of the wisdom of the elders to create a story that really is a metaphor for dignity and grace, and a metaphor for the beauty that lives in all of us, as well as speaking to the mystery of who we are. And as always in our nature, there is dignity and beauty and grace, but there are always the whispers of diminishment. There are parts of ourselves that are constantly wanting to take away from our own beauty, grace, and dignity, our own mystery, and there are always people lined up to want to take away your beauty, your dignity, your grace, and belie you the mystery that is truly within you. But there comes a time, we've all hit this time, when we're unwilling to pay attention to what's there. And we will always have a teaching of humility, and wounds teach us quite a bit about humility. So in this story, the woman wondered what she had done, why she was excluded, and you probably picked up from the telling that her heart was really heavy, but she continued to do her chores. She continued to do the things that were expected of her. Much like us when we survive in our wounds, we continue to do what is expected of us. We are continued to do our work with a heavy heart. I had an experience just today. I was in my wonderful and fun Zumba class, and I could feel the instructor in her heaviness of her heart. And as we were dancing, I swear during one part of the song, I could see her nose turn red, and I swore I saw tears come down her cheeks. So even in this place where she is wounded, she continues to do her chores. She continues to teach the class. In this story, there is a conscious awareness that something is off or something is amiss because she didn't trust her instincts. And oftentimes we don't trust our instincts, which causes wounds, but there are also times when our wounds make us not trust our instincts. So that's the paradox of woundedness. So where do we not trust our instincts? And where we don't trust our instincts, we become instinct injured. Now pay attention, because this is an interesting little phrase. What we do is we begin to normalize the abnormal and abnormalize the normal whenever we don't trust our instincts. The thing is, we're consciously aware of them, but we don't act upon them. And this will always set us up for a teaching in humility. So the woman goes down to the river where the women are obviously having a wonderful time, and they turned and they included her. Can you imagine what that would have felt like? She'd been excluded all this time. She once again has been conscious that these were not kind people. Nothing about the villagers were benign. Nothing was benign about them. And yet, once again, those of us who have a tendency to live in that place of, everything's going to turn out different, everything's going to be all right. You know, Einstein said, I think the only mark of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And this is kind of where we're coming from in this story. Instead, she said, oh, how wonderful I will be included, how wonderful that I will be seen. And so she went into the river, and she noticed, as the story says, that they didn't have their necklaces on, and asked where they had put them. And they said, oh, so this becomes the ultimate betrayal. Oh, we gave him the ultimate seduction. The ultimate seduction is spiritual seduction. Or the seduction is that put in the guise of spirit. Oh, this morning we did an offering to the gods and the goddesses of river. Again, we hear this ultimate seduction. So they use spirituality as a guise. And she was deeply touched and deeply moved. And she removed her beautiful necklace. And she said reverent prayers and threw it with all of her might into the river. She was seduced by the inclusion of spirituality. So again, she's not trusting her own instincts, or that what she's constantly aware of, and she begins to normalize the abnormal. In this place, I would call this just abject denial, is what I would call this. She again is abnormalizing the normal, and that she's indulging. She's indulging in that wound. She's indulging the wound of abandonment and recapitulation into acceptance. She's indulging in this. And we always have our lessons in humility. So humus, the root of that, means of the earth. So out of which comes human being, human, humility, humiliation. We're always brought to earth where we're not paying attention to what is so. When we are in patterns of denial or indulgence, we are not in our medicine wheel. We're not in our home. We're standing outside of ourselves. When we are beside ourselves with anger, we're in a pattern of anger. We're in a pattern of wound. Standing outside of ourselves is a language of soul loss, but that again is a whole other topic. Back to the story, it is in that teaching of humility that we begin to come back home to our own instincts and back home to our own wisdom. So part of the story happens in water, that place of birthing instincts, that place on the medicine wheel where we have accumulated an X amount of knowledge, and now we're turning this into wisdom. So when she went to the sides of the riverbank, she began to pray, and she began to pray to the gods and goddesses to bring her necklace back. And the first time she hears that sound, she dismisses her intuition. And she hears it again, and she can't dismiss her intuition. She knows that the river is talking to her, despite this being a not normal occurrence. Plunge in, plunge in. So here we are. She's just been humiliated. So she's standing in a place of almost egoless, and she's beginning to listen again. And so when she hears something, she hears it again, plunge in. And this time, without hesitation or reservation or ambivalence, she follows that guidance, that wisdom voice. Kind of like that mother in the story of Sealskin, where the mother rode down and was the voice of wisdom, in that the boy can't stay here very much longer. The boy can't stay here. So because she wants to move past her wounding, she plunges into the river. She went back to her own riverbed. She went back home. She came back home to her own self. There's always waiting for us, and the hag is the wisdom within the story. That is the personification of wisdom. Wisdom looks scary, so our ancestors would try to drive us away from wisdom, or if we really wanted to learn something, would make it really difficult for us. So the story talks about the difficulty of getting wisdom. She's gone under the water. She has died. She can't live under the water. But the wise hag is the wise person, and she's telling you, you have healing work to do. And every wound carries some wisdom. You've got healing work to do. Now let's get on with it. This is what the story is telling us. You're home now. You're in your own self. Let's get on to the healing. Lick my sores. That was the guidance. And I am compassionate with my own woundedness. Or are you repulsed and repelled by your own woundedness, such as the women who came in after? And she crawled, being the woman that she was. She crawled on hands and knees, and she took the old woman's hand and she licked her sore. And then that amazing thing happened. Her sores closed and she became radiant. So when we attend to one wound, we attend to all of our wounds. As Clarissa Pinkola Estes says, we are all members of the Scar clan. All of us. Not one of us gets out of being a member of the Scar clan. Our challenge is not to keep reopening our wounds, but to let them heal. I know that many times I have dug into a particular wound, and then I think, oh, well, maybe I haven't dealt with it enough, so I dig in a little deeper, and I dig in a little deeper, and it doesn't allow for the natural healing time to occur. So I've kicked myself repeatedly for the same thing. And sometimes I don't reflect on what others have done to me. So when I don't attend my own wounds with compassion and understanding, then I am the one who is rewounded again, same as many of us are. Many of us get in there and muck around on our wounds. Well, that isn't big enough, so I guess I'll go in there and muck around a bit much. And we don't allow for that natural healing term. And whenever we go home to our own riverbed. Not only is the wise voice of wisdom there, telling us that it's time to heal ourselves, but there is this relentless drive for wholeness in our nature. And we talk about soul retrieval in shamanism. We talk about bringing ourselves to wholeness and gathering the pieces of ourself. Our psychomythology, so our ability to read the world in myth and story, is still much stronger than our psychopathology. There's always this relentless drive towards wholeness. And it is this wisdom within us that says, it's time to heal this. It's time to take care of this. We have to get going. Don't get stuck. But there's also the demon in the river. And that's a really important part of the story, because there's always that antagonist. That demon is waiting for anything that is trusting or innocent or new in our nature. It wants to gobble it up. And the young maiden, that beautiful Nubian woman, that part of herself that has come back home, that is new and trusting and innocent and willing to listen. And if we're willing to listen to our own guidance, our own wisdom always comes to protect us. The wisdom nature protects us from our own demons. Oh, you'll never catch her. She went that way, you old demon of the river. She went that way. You will never catch her. And whenever we have returned to the soul of ourselves, to our own home, to our own riverbed, we can't stay there. We have to bring into action, spirit in action. If our wisdom says, all right, now that you've come back home, you've now learned to listen again, you need to go back out. And so when she clapped her hands and threw her out of the river, she had transcended from the initiation of death, and now she is reborn on the sides of the river. And in that process of being reborn, all the river itself becomes messy. The river itself becomes big. The river itself has white caps on it. So even that place of transition has to churn very strongly to get us out of that water. Spirit in action again. So once we come out of that river, now we have to learn how to listen again when we go back out. So now you have done some deep healing work and we're more whole. And she gets new garments because she is different. And when we have been inside doing some very deep healing work, we have literally returned to ourselves, which is the essence of humility. And humus is that when we are thrown back out, we recognize we are different. Given a new set of clothing, I know in some of the journeys that I've done when I've gone through dismemberment or had my power animals take away all pieces of me, I'm often given a whole new clothing to wear. And it is that aspect. We have to clothe ourselves again. So even in my own journeys, long before I heard of this story, my own journeys were reverberating with the wisdom that the ancestors talked about in this story of the Nubian woman or the necklace. So as we've changed and we've been doing some very deep healing work, we've literally again returned to ourselves. And again, that is that essence. Something has different. And she saw the soul of who she was. She really connected to her own nature again. We're always reconnected to our nature when we take time to listen to our guidance. And most of all and above all things is to trust our own wisdom nature on our own guidance. And yet it was Friday again, same as it ever again was. It was Friday again. And yet I'm radically different. And all the women were coming down to do the wash. And they immediately noticed that something was different. Just like people notice when we've changed and grown or done some deep healing work. I know there are many times when I've come through what I commonly refer to as God shots. And I will have a beautiful experience with spirit. And often what happens in that is it's recognized. And in that recognition, I know that something deep has come. So being the woman that she was when she pointed to the river, but it was too late. And they went home for all the wrong reasons. And when we go home for wrong reasons and we're not listening to our own guidance, we've gone to someone else's guidance. There's this old wise person sitting there saying, time to do the healing work if you're coming home, because if we pay attention to our wounds have a voice. We have work to do. We come back home and we say, ew, lick my sores. I'm never doing that. So when we go home for the wrong reasons or we jump into something before our time, we're always gobbled up by our demons. And we're gobbled up by our demons when we don't listen to our own guidance. Something that I've heard tell from another storyteller is my self-worth as strong as my self-critic? And this, I think, is a powerful teaching story. Back to you, Doug.
Very, very cool. I got to admit, I never thought we'd talk about licking sores for our 10th episode, but I think it was very, very awesome.
I didn't either.
So on that note, we'll wrap up here. We will have show notes as usual on shamansway.net, so please do go check those out. And thank you for everyone listening out there for being with us for the first 10 episodes.
Thank you for the milestone and for keeping us going and the words of encouragement. It has been a delightful journey thus far. I look forward to more.
Yeah, at this point we can literally say we've had thousands of downloads and it's very motivational. So,
yes.
Thank you to everyone.
I also wanted to take this moment just to quickly talk to you guys about a new course that we're putting out. It's our first ever online course. It'll be called Practical Shamanism, and it really goes over the basics of what shamanism is, why we use drums, rattles, etc., how to use them, what types of medicine and medicine pouches we keep when we're doing different work, And then at the end of it, we will have a special episode on how to do house clearings or space clearings of ill intent or misaligned spirits and things like that. So we wanted to make sure there was something in there very tangible that you could then go and put to work. So again, that'll be available for registration starting June 6th, and we should have the whole course ready to actually kick off in July. If you want to sign up for that, you can go to shamansway.net/practical-shamanism, or just go to shamansway.net, and in the top right corner there should be a link there that says Learn Practical Shamanism. Until next time, everyone, thanks for joining us again. Cheers.